Locked on Vikings, Locked on Falcons, Sunday Night Football. Who's got it better than us? Welcome to the Locked On Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Vikings and Locked On Falcons podcast. Hello, Falcons fans. Hello, Vikings fans. Welcome in to everybody. And this Crossover Thursday is, of course, brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm here with Aaron Freeman. My name is Luke Braun. I do Locked On Vikings. Aaron does Locked On Falcons. How are you feeling, Aaron?
I'd be feeling a little bit better if the Falcons were coming off a win, and I'd be like, they can lose to the Vikings on prime time, and it'll be fine because it'll be 1-1, and we won't have to have the 0-2 conversation. Although, boy. Falcons talking about making the playoffs, with the 0-2, 1-1, 2-0 type starts is
17-game season that doesn't have the power it used to.
Yeah, that's what I figured, but we got to plumb the depths for all the narratives here on these daily podcasts, right, Luke?
You're like down. You got drama going down to the kicker. I feel like you got a lot going on. How's Kirk feeling? Is he doing his job as a backup?
Who? Kirk?
Yeah,
Kirk?
Kirko.
Yeah.
Top cap hit on the team.
Kirk's doing great. He's doing wonderful. Brock Purdy might be a little nicked up. People making phone calls like, "Hey, Kyle, come for your guy."
The prophecy. Kyle Shanahan's been trying to get him for like 6 years. That makes so much sense. Okay, but what about the quarterbacks that'll actually play? So yeah, for those who live under a rock, I mean, the Falcons very infamously pick eight overall, take Michael Penix. Nobody had him penciled in for a quarterback at all, let alone that one, over the person who consensus was the fourth quarterback in that, which was J.J. McCarthy. Vikings get McCarthy a couple picks later. How are we feeling about it?
Feeling great. Penix looks good. 4 starts into his NFL career. By no means perfect. No one's gonna, build a statue quite yet. But we're collecting funds at this point in time. We're getting a grassroots campaign going for building that statue in front of Mercedes-Benz Stadium at this point in time, because the thing that Penix does so well is in the fourth quarter, he seems to be able to put the team in position to win games. Unfortunately, as we saw the last time the Falcons played a primetime game in Week 17 last year against Washington, and then last week against Tampa Bay, he'll put them in a position where they can tie the game or win the game in the closing minutes, and then the kicker messes up. And so that's where we're at. So Penix is doing great, but the team around Michael Penix is where all of our concerns are at this stage.
So like this is going to be the story of this game, right? Is J.J. McCarthy versus Michael Penix. McCarthy's only had the one game. It was pretty interesting. I think most people watched it. It was Monday Night Football, right? 3 terrible quarters, comes back, turns it on in the fourth, wins the game. We've spoken quite a bit about it on Locked On Vikings. But what I remember from Penix from the draft, which is really the last time I paid a lot of attention, was that it was a lot of explosives out to Rome Odunze. It was a lot of, deep go balls. The accuracy was spotty. That's really my question: is Penix still spraying them sometimes, or has he dialed that in now here in year 2?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the body of works. There's still some sprays. That Washington game was probably the most prevalent one last season. This past Sunday, other than maybe 2 or 3 throws, I don't know if you would be looking at it and going oh, accuracy was a problem, but in certain situations, a couple of times when the Falcons were in the red zone, you just okay, maybe this football should be a foot lower or a foot higher or a foot to the left, that type of situation. But it does feel like, at least based off of what little we have seen of Michael Penix so far in 2025, and like J.J. McCarthy, we didn't get to see him really in the preseason, and so we're really judging it off of 4 quarters of Week 1. The accuracy, I don't think, is right now a major issue at this point in time.
That's huge.
The main thing right now from Week 1 is just the big vertical throws, the field stretching ability wasn't there. And a big part of that had to do, I think, with not having Darnell Mooney, where his replacement, Casey Washington, the Falcons put him as their sort of solo X ISO'd on one side of the field. And Washington just isn't the guy that can win those situations. And if that would have been Mooney, based off of how the Bucs played him, like Mooney probably would have had like 200 yards in that situation, just winning those one-on-ones that Washington wasn't able to win. And so without that, without Drake London necessarily being able to hit some of those downfield throws, the Falcons weren't very effective throwing beyond 10, 15 yards in week one.
That's going to be a really interesting thing to attack. I don't really know what Brian Flores is doing right this year and how it's different because Ben Johnson has kind of had his number, and I think there was a very specific game plan for that, especially now the different Caleb Williams game in the division. You kind of come out with a specially cooked thing for like that team because you know it really well. So I don't know what the key is going to be, and I don't know how useful that tape is going to be to the Falcons, which is probably not great for the Falcons. But it kind of leads me to the question of, the Vikings had a really easy time getting pressure against the Bears. And that's no slouch of an O-line, kind of famously rebuilt with players that should be seen as pretty good. But they struggled to block on the interior. So assuming the Vikings can still get a little pressure on the interior, we'll talk about those matchups in the trenches specifically. But I want to really know how these two quarterbacks deal with pressure and how that affects things. McCarthy was under a ton of pressure early in the Monday Night Football game, and he rushed his process a little bit, and it led to misreads or timings not being quite right. And then once he settled in a little bit, it got a little better. But like that definitely had an impact, and I'll be curious to see if there is pressure again, if it has the same impact, or if that was just a first game jitters thing. But what about how Penix deals with being under pressure?
Yeah, it's not the same as Caleb Williams, right? He's not going to run around and
no, he's never been that kind of job.
Yeah. I think he's shown a little bit more creation ability. That was a knock on Penix coming out, which is like he's strictly a pocket quarterback, and if you can get pressure and get him off his spot, like things dip. That hasn't really been a major issue for him through 4 starts. And so you saw at the end of last week's game him being able to extend plays, convert a couple of 4th downs in the red zone, including what was the go-ahead touchdown before Baker Mayfield and the Bucs went down the field and scored the game-winning touchdown late in the 4th quarter last week. I think Penix is getting there, but like I know, Luke, you talked about this earlier this week on Locked On Vikings with that interior pressure. That wasn't something that, when you look at that interior pressure, the Bears or the Vikings were able to get on the Bears. You didn't get that last week against the Bucs. You got some of that, and most of that with the Bucs were able to generate that with like stunts and twists and being able to get a free rusher in there. And Penix, for the most part, handled it, but there was a couple of times in that game where it did, cause some issues with some of the pressure that they were able to dial up. But for the most part, he handled it very well.
Yeah, and I think one thing to kind of wrap out this QB discussion before we move to some other stuff, I think we have to say, at least up to this juncture, we've only seen one game of J.J. McCarthy and 4 of Penix, but that Penix looks better. McCarthy won NFC Player of the Week. That's something, I guess. He was surprised by that, by the way. He was like, really? He said on the podium, he was like, I guess. Okay, I was surprised. But like, 3 bad quarters, 1 good one versus Penix, who's looked a little bit steadier, but super small sample sizes. And we can't really take that to the bank yet. This is going to be an on prime time chance for the Falcons to go out there and prove to everybody that they were right to do this, and they got lambasted for it when they did it. And to prove to everybody that they were right this year to get those 2 edge rushers, if those guys are those guys available to contribute to? Yeah. So this is, I think, an opportunity for the Falcons to get on the national consciousness a little bit better and prove that they were right to do all these things that everybody called these totally drunken decisions. Whereas on the other side, this is kind of the same thing for the Vikings and J.J. McCarthy to say, hey, you should have picked our guy. And you didn't. They got to do that to the Bears a little bit. And now they get to do it again. And doing it on primetime 2 weeks in a row, I always thought it was an interesting choice by the schedule makers. Let the Vikings go out there and essentially get that murderer's row of 2024 quarterbacks. And they get Jaden Daniels later in the season too. So they get to do that one. it'll be very interesting to see who plays better. I'm actually going to check out the FanDuel odds in a little bit for what the actual expectation here is, because the Vikings are favored by 4.5 points. But we'll get into those predictions and some of that stuff in the trenches all next on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings and Locked On Falcons is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. And you can feel that Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Nappa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Look, NFL players, the people we talk about on these shows, care about every single detail. And that is what Mazda is inspired by. They care about every detail. Because when every move you make counts, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also sponsored by 5 Hour Energy. If you are looking for that little midday pick-me-up, you can turn it up with the 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It's grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot, which brings the iconic taste of a classic golf course favorite with a non-alcoholic boost. It's perfect for the golf course. I used to work at a golf course when I was a teenager, and this was right around the time when 5 Hour Energy was first hitting the market, like in the late 2000s. And it was such a popular thing. I would clean out the carts. There would always be a couple of those little bottles for somebody who needed a little pick-me-up on the back nine. It is a time-honored tradition now here, though, in the year of 2025. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. This grape ginger lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. Now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters Tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. Moving on here with Crossover Thursday. Locked On Vikings, Locked On Falcons. I really feel like this game comes down to the trenches, but maybe you can tell me more about what's going on outside of them. But the thing I'm fascinated with the Vikings is the fact that they actually have guys who can get interior pressure now, and Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave both had fantastic games against that Bears line. So I want to ask you, how are you feeling about the Falcons O-line? I genuinely know nothing about where you guys are at right now.
Okay. Well, he got a lot of catch up on, Luke. Not great.
Catch me up.
Not great, man. They lose Drew Dahlman, right? You
right.
Got to see Drew Dahlman in his new spot in Chicago. His replacement
didn't
Ryan
go great for Drew Dahlman in that first one, so you might not be too broken up about that.
Yeah, but the problem is Ryan Newsom's not better than Drew Dahlman. That's the problem, right?
And is this guy? I was looking at Our Lads and I didn't recognize the name. How does this guy become a Falcon? Was he like a
undrafted free agent, 2021 practice squad backup?
Okay, so he's like a developmental, guy that's been around now. He's been depth for a few years. He's getting a shot.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And they lose Caleb McGarry for the season, the right tackle.
Oh,
His
really?
replacement is Elijah Wilkinson.
I'm so unplugged, man. Like, I didn't even know that.
Yes, he's done for the year. And basically, they can't run the football because their offensive line basically has one good run blocker, because their three best run blockers last year were Drew Dahlman, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry. And they've lost two of those guys, and the replacements are significant downgrades. And they needed their third-year left guard, Matthew Bergeron, to step up and be a better run blocker. And he struggled to move Kalijah Kancey, all 14 pounds of Kalijah Kancey off the ball last week.
You're doing great with this, though.
This is not great. It's a little different trying to do that against Jonathan Allen, So it's not great, Luke. It's not great, the offensive line, as we sit here today.
I will say the Vikings are light in the pants. As much as these guys got a lot of pressure, these guys get moved too. Like they traded away Harrison Phillips. There is one person in the building on the defense who's over 315, and he's Taki Taimani's on the practice squad. So like, and I don't think he's going to be active or anything. So like this is not a big giant, we don't have like an Andrew Billings type, like a big, honker in the middle. So I will say that like maybe that matches up okay, but like if you can't run the ball, how are the Falcons moving the ball then?
Yeah, I mean, running the football is going to be key, right? And again, I'll be curious to get your thoughts on what you think Brian Flores' game plan was, because watching the game, it did feel like he was kind of chill with what he was doing. But as
he was like backing off and covering and basically making Caleb Williams go through reads.
Yeah.
And hoping it could take a while. And then essentially all the pass rushes were trying to ISO like Jonah Jackson on Javon Hargrave all day. So just pick a weakness and see what, like pick a mismatch and try to isolate it was basically all he was doing. But he kept a lot of the blitz stuff close to the chest. So I'm going to be honest, Aaron, I have no idea what you're going to see. It could be anything.
I'm wondering if he's like basically like, okay, we got prime time, so I'll go psycho mode, like I like to do against
He could. I think there was something very specific to the Bears happening. I have no idea what happens for the teams that aren't specifically Ben Johnson.
So, my assumption is like the key for the Falcons is running the football, because, if you can, as they say, like take the will out of the defense, that prevents Brian Flores from doing maybe as much kooky things that he has the potential to do defensively with the pre-snap and post-snap and all that stuff. And they struggle with that, but as you say, like it's the NFL, and like you can have 1 week where a team just cannot move the ball at all, and then the following week they like get their act together and have a great week of practice, and the O-line coach is lighting a fire in them, like you guys cost us the game, you need to step it up, all that sort of stuff, and then they come out inspired. Like you saw it last year in the week 2 game against the Falcons, against the Eagles, where they just ran the ball through that Eagles defense. And basically after that point, the Eagles were like, hey, you just got embarrassed and we're not going to be and basically they were able to stop the run for the rest of the season because of that. So the Falcons maybe need to have that sort of moment for their run game. But I think we'll see if I think Flores, if he plays a lot of that too high stuff that he loves to do to sort of get Michael Penix to matriculate the ball down the field like Caleb Williams, that could be a challenge for the Falcons. If Drake London's not healthy, he's dealing with the shoulder injury. Raheem Morris indicated on Wednesday that he expects him to play, but we'll see. Raheem says things like, "Oh, we expect this guy to play," and then they're out for like a month. So and then
Darnell Mooney, it's all cloak and dagger.
Yeah, and Mooney's dealing with his shoulder injury that he suffered at the beginning of training camp, and he's working his way back, and hopefully he gets back. But if they don't have those two guys, it really just becomes, you have to be able to run the football. Otherwise, your offense is not going to be able to be that functional. I don't know if Kyle Pitts, you can run your passing game through Kyle Pitts.
I'm surprised to hear that, because I kind of feel like, look, the only exposure I had to the Falcons game was what showed on Red Zone, which was a lot of it. It was an interesting game, but it kind of felt like I was always seeing Bijan Robinson. They just started throwing him the ball instead, and we'll just move the ball that way and screw a run game. I know that's like less sustainable, and the Vikings in particular are pretty good about that kind of thing with, tackling with the corners, although Isaiah Rodgers was not the best tackler, nor was Byron Murphy. We had a bit of an issue on that. And I do see like an opening here for the Falcons, where if you can get a swing pass to Bijan Robinson, I do think he can make these corners miss and punish, and then suddenly get explosives based on that. And by the way, that's a quick strike. So if Flores is going to blitz half the time, that could be a counter that I don't know if we're quite equipped to handle. It's one of the hardest guys in the league to bring down. But it all kind of comes down to being able to, like, if the Falcons can't keep up in the trenches because of what you've said here, which this does feel like a mismatch to me. Maybe I'm being a huge homer, or you're just dooming out because the Falcons lost. We're reinforcing each other here. But if that does turn out to be the case, I do kind of still feel like, okay, screen out to Bijan Robinson and let him cook in the open field, no?
Well, I think, maybe I'm underselling. I think the pass protection is fine for the Falcons on the offensive line. It's just the run blocking just is the big question mark. And so, I do think, yes, getting the ball into Bijan's hands and letting him cook and just, go do something incredible which he did a number of times last Sunday and does on a regular basis, is an effective way. But it's one of those things where it's like, if that's your only thing, that you're just basically just waiting for Bijan to bust a 50-yard touchdown every single week in order for your offense to be effective, I don't know if you can live that way, but it can be a very useful tool in your arsenal. I just don't know if it's going to be your main weapon.
So what about over the top? What about, all right, we're going to get pressure all day long. Let's hit a dig route over the middle, throw over that blitz.
Yeah, I mean, again, like a lot of that has to do with the health of the Falcons wide receivers. And I feel I would, again, if I could sit here, Luke, and say, I know Drake London, I know Darnell Mooney are going to play on Sunday, I'd feel way better about what this Falcons offense can do if they're at full strength. But with the unknowns, again, I'm going to have to give Raheem Morris the benefit of the doubt when he says that he expects Drake London to play. But it could be a situation where, like, yeah, he plays, and then, Josh Metellus, nukes him or something like that, and then he's out for like the last 3 quarters of the game or something like that. So we'll see.
Well, speaking of injuries, we just got the Wednesday injury report, and the Vikings are absolutely decimated right now. DNPs, they probably won't have Blake Cashman on defense. Ryan Kelly is a DNP with a toe injury, so that's something on our offensive line. Harrison Smith is still limited with a mystery illness. Andrew Van Ginkel has a concussion. Jeff Okudah has a concussion. By the way, Jeff Okudah starting Minnesota Vikings corner. That's going on over here. So if those receivers are healthy, we've got Isaiah Rodgers, who has not started, and then Jeff Okudah is the third corner, and Byron Murphy. That's the group. And then it's like a bunch of like 3 safety stuff. So like I'm saying, there's an opening. But what actually is going to happen in these matchups, that is what we're going to have to get into next on the Locked On NFL crossover. This crossover episode of Locked On Vikings and Locked On Falcons is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now is a great time to get involved with FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. As we are recording this, the line has moved a little bit more toward the Falcons. It's Vikings -3.5 at home with home field advantage. That sees the teams as fairly even. So if you want to get in on that, hit the Falcons money line at +156 or any kind of alternate spread or points total. And later in the week, you'll get passing props, receiving props, and all of the big stuff that you get to do right before a big Sunday night football game. You can find it. Whatever it is, if you put $5 on whatever you think you're really confident in, assuming that wins, even if it's got super short odds, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It's like a free 60-1 on any bet you want to go make. So if you are ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, Aaron, how are we going to do this? I hate doing score predictions. I think you do too. We never do that with these. I always ask the guy, I'm like, we want to, we don't need to like say some random arbitrary numbers, but the line is 3.5 at FanDuel. I swear to God, I looked at it this morning. It was 4.5. So apparently people have been hammering the Falcons. Do you think that's appropriate? Do you think that that's still a misalignment of the betting line at FanDuel?
No, I felt like at 4.5, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely take the Falcons on this one, because this is probably going to be boiled down to a field goal. Like so many NFL games, what's the stat? Like 60% of NFL games are decided by 4 points or less. So it's just like, yeah, man, especially with JJ having the up and down performance, a lot of down, and then one big spike of up at the end of the game. Like that feels like the type of game that comes down to the last possession, a field goal, that type of thing. And so, yeah, take the Falcons to cover at 4.5. Now at 3.5, it's a little tighter, but I'd still feel good about betting on the Falcons at that line.
Here's a question that we haven't really gotten to, and I have to ask everybody who plays the Vikings: what's the Justin Jefferson plan? The Jefferson was a little off his game against the Bears, but there was a lot of doubling, tripling on him. They kind of did the normal. Dennis Allen did the normal thing. Let's not let Justin Jefferson run wild on us. Let's make somebody else beat us. And so a lot of the passing went elsewhere, but there wasn't a ton of passing volume. because things were so bad for the first part of that game. McCarthy only ends up with 143 yards total passing, and a lot of that goes to like Jalen Naylor. So I can't imagine that that's going to continue. And I think they're going to try to get Jefferson involved a lot more. So knowing that, anticipating that as the Falcons, what's the plan?
I'm assuming that they're going to have AJ Terrell travel and give him safety help. Because Luke, as you
I think that's what happened last time.
Yeah, you may recall that there was a couple of times where Justin Jefferson, AJ Terrell wasn't on Justin Jefferson, and bad things happened to the Falcons defense last time, the Vikings.
Yeah, they were like busts there, like that weird stuff. That game was wild. that Sam Darnold saw God and like faced backwards. Like that was insane.
I've never laughed more at watching coverage bust after coverage bust. It was like hilarious. It was meme worthy type coverage bust for the Falcons on the back end watching that game.
Who was it that just like turned around and just fell?
D. Alford. Yeah.
D. Alford. Yeah. That was a crazy one.
Yeah. So I don't think the Falcons are going to invite that again. So I think they're going to probably, and when you go back to that game, AJ Terrell versus Justin Jefferson, much better matchup where I don't, my recollection is I don't think any of Jefferson's catches came against AJ Terrell in that game. I think he had like 7 catches or whatever it was.
I can look at that.
But yeah, I would imagine that's the plan just because I don't think you want Justin Jefferson against a safety in Billy Bowman, who is the Falcons' main nickel, or Mike Hughes, who also got that work from, I think, both Jefferson and Jordan Addison.
Mike Hughes had a day to forget, and we all enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the plan is going to be AJ Terrell travel, but that, as I think you said, like that creates one-on-ones for everybody else. And can Jalen Naylor and Adam Thielen win those situations against this Falcons cornerback room? I think it's definitely a possibility.
Looks like, I think I got to look at it the other way, but it looks like AJ Terrell was only targeted once that whole game, and it was to Aaron Jones. Some kind of zone for a 5-yard gain. So yeah. I'm curious to see too how the offense kind of evolves now that we've gotten a little bit under our belt here. This is the first time O'Connell and McCarthy have done a whole game together, right? The only thing they've done before is preseason where you do a series and you sit down. So like this is the first time they've really gone through the rhythm of a game together. And I wonder how much about things change. I'm sure you saw it. McCarthy had a lot on his plate to start, and I think once they simplified things a little bit, then he started to things started to open up. That was at least my observation, although there were reports that it was a little bit more of the opposite. When Kevin O'Connell just coached the way he wanted to coach, McCarthy could kind of do what he needed to. But either way, it just needed to open up and get a little more comfortable. And so it's really a weird week 2 is a weird time to get the Vikings. I just don't really know what they're going to try to do, let alone what they're going to actually succeed at doing. The vibes in Minnesota are on the moon. The vibes in Atlanta seem like they're in the gutter right now after a really heartbreaking loss. Every experience that I have tells me that this is when you get hit with the old switcheroo and both of these teams exit 1-1 and an upset happens. But that doesn't mean that's more of a vibes analysis. I do think that, basically seeing these teams as even-ish and giving the Vikings home field advantage feels like an appropriate way to do this. It feels like a good enough way to kind of throw your hands up and say, I don't really know what's going to happen. Let's see. I'll be curious to see the actual passing lines and stuff. Is Penix expected to actually move the ball that much? Is McCarthy expected to move the ball that much? Who's supposed to throw interceptions and all that? One thing that I've been doing on Locked On Vikings, and I invite you to join me, is bold predictions. Been doing this for a long time on Locked On Vikings. And I've been making basically a charity bet with everybody who I take a bold prediction from. I'll donate $20 to a charity of your choice. If you give me a sufficiently bold prediction and it hits, do you have one for me?
Let's go with J.J. McCarthy 3 interceptions.
J.J. McCarthy 3 interceptions. I'm putting it in the doc. If it
Well,
happens, I'll hit you up.
let's go for it. I need something. I need something this week to root for. So yeah, let's go for that.
That's excellent. Do you have any other major facets of this game that we haven't really gotten to? Any big matchups or any other big keys to the game?
Well, I just think special teams matters, right?
Yeah.
You know, you got the
What's the kicker sitch? Who's the new guy?
John Parker Romo. You may be familiar with him.
Oh, that's right. We are familiar with him.
You know,
Hero
so
of heroes, San Antonio Brahma, if I recall.
Yeah, so they added him to the practice squad basically as an insurance policy in the event that Younghoe Koo stinks again this week. And it's been a rough 12 months for Younghoe Koo.
It has. Yeah. Didn't he change his lead up?
He's been it's kind of been an evolving thing over the last couple of years. And so it became a bigger talking point last year because it wasn't working. But it's been an ongoing thing.
All right. Will Reichard's also been something of an ongoing thing. He had a kind of a rough camp, but had a great day in Soldier. So we'll see how all that is. But we also, if you want to talk special teams, there's a couple of interesting subplots here. The punter is on thin ice. He was in a pretty spicy competition in camp. With a guy named Oscar Chapman, who was like an Aussie who botched a hold in the last preseason game and lost the job, but like kind of was outplaying him. And we have that, and then Ryan Wright shanks one on Monday Night Football, and we're going, are we sure about this? I still am not quite ruling out like a mid-season move there. But yeah, special teams make special teams. It absolutely matters. Aaron, thank you so much for another beautiful crossover Thursday. Locked On Vikings, Locked On Falcons. I always tell Vikings fans, go check out Locked On Falcons. Go interact. Go have a little fun. It's always good to do a little Oppo research, if nothing else. And Falcons fans, you are, of course, welcome to come hang out on the Locked On Vikings podcast this week or any week. Go check around the network. Aaron, thank you so much. My name is Luke. We will see you all next time.